So welcome. Yeah, thank you for joining today's webinar. So it's Drive Talent Acquisition and Retention using Technology. So it's how to attract and retain the right candidates using recruitment, onboarding and training solutions. So just to give you a quick introduction. So the main host today are myself, Chris Longyor. So I'm the Global Head of Retention for Fliplet, and my colleague Kyle, who will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, Kyle, account manager at Fliplet, working with our enterprise clients on strategic and commercial aspects of the partnership. Nice to meet you all.
Superb, thank you, Kyle. But more importantly, and the person I'm sure you've come to hear today, not myself and Kyle, is Matt Alder. So Matt is our guest speaker, 20+ years experience working with Fortune and FTSE 100 companies. Matt's helped to innovate the HR and recruitment processes through technology, bringing a wealth of experience to help them attract and retain the right talent. So we're delighted to have Matt with us today. So Matt, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the webinar. Brilliant to hear what everyone's got to say, share some thoughts. The only thing I'd add to my introduction is, I think it's important to always tell people where your insights come from. So I run, as well as doing consulting, I also run a podcast on the future of recruitment. And I speak to 2 talent acquisition leaders every single week of the year about the challenges they're having and what they're finding that's going on in the marketplace. So that's the insights I'm bringing to the conversation today.
Brilliant, thank you, Matt. And you'll hear a lot more from Matt as we go forward. So I've just stopped sharing the slides. That's enough slides for the time being. So the theme for today's webinar, as we said, we're looking at attracting and retaining the right people and how technology can assist with this. So we'll be chatting to Matt about the current talent acquisition climate, the employee journey, and how technology has supported this so far, and also to what extent people have embraced technology to aid recruitment and retention. What I'll also do is bring Kyle back in to look at how apps will help shape the future of talent acquisition and retention. And I'll share with you as well some examples and case studies of what we have learned from sectors that have been fast movers in this field and some clients that we work with currently here at Fliplet. We will, of course, have some audience participation. You can't just not be involved at all, in the form of a couple of polls that will come at various points during the webinar. And then to wrap up, we'll see where Matt sees the future in this space. And please, if you do have any questions at any time, if you just pop them in the chat, and we'll get back to them in a Q&A session at the end of the session. Matt, over to you. Can you tell us more about the current talent acquisition and retention climate that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the whole time I've been working in this industry, I don't think any of us have ever seen anything like what we're seeing at the moment. I don't have to tell everyone who's here that the last 2 years has been unprecedented for almost everything that we do. But in talent acquisition, we're just seeing everything moving very quickly and just huge pressure for different types of talent from employers. And it's something that's happening all over the world. It's not just, it's not just in the UK or the US, it's happening, it's happening everywhere. So obviously, a huge amount of talk about the Great Resignation or the Great Reset, or whatever we want to call it. But the fact of the matter is that employers are finding it harder and harder to recruit. What this means is, as well as being better at things like recruitment marketing and employer branding, everything is having to move a lot quicker. So the employers who are recruiting the talent they need are moving through their recruitment process faster than they've ever done before, but it's doing it quickly, but also doing it in a way that maintains the quality of that process, but also make sure that the candidates in that process, once you've found them and got them interested in your organization, they have the information they need to make quick decisions as well. And the key thing that's driving the speed is just the sheer amount of other offers that candidates might be sitting on, or companies moving faster. So we're seeing a huge demand for talent. We're seeing recruitment dramatically speeding up, or we're seeing people making attempts to speed recruitment up, and also, remote work has been very, very interesting. Obviously, not everyone can work remotely, and not every company is working remotely at the moment. There's an interesting, I think we've got an interesting few months coming up in terms of which companies sort of pull everyone back to the office, and which companies operate in a hybrid fashion, and which companies just move to be completely remote. In terms of some of the implications on talent acquisition, there's a positive one and perhaps a more challenging one. The positive one is what I'm really seeing is companies who are really kind of embracing this are managing to open up much bigger pools of talent for themselves. So, they can look at talent in different parts of the country, in different countries, all over the world. And that's kind of really opening up the pools of talent. The flip side of that is obviously it means that the people who already work for your organization also have those choices. So it just makes everything more competitive. I was talking to a head of talent acquisition yesterday in a large engineering company, and half of their organization can't work remotely. They have to work in the office. They have to work on site, obviously. But the rest of that organization, although they can work remotely, they were debating that they should perhaps, be made to come to the office, because then it was consistent throughout the company. However, those people were being targeted to go and work in other organizations that were working remotely. So remote work is it's really interesting and adding sort of lots of confusion and complication to things. But I suppose the final point is really what we're talking about today, and that's how technology can facilitate all of this. It can make it better, and it can make it quicker. And I'm really looking forward to sort of getting into the conversation about how that's happening.
Great insight. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. A lot of change clearly going on as well. One question I have got on the follow-up to that is remote working. You mentioned it a couple of times in that. How big do you think that's been in changing the recruitment climate right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the caveat that there are a whole host of jobs and roles that have never been remote at any point during the pandemic. But for those types of roles that are, it's really been revolutionary, and a lot of that in terms of recruiting, and a lot of that has been around video interviewing and the type of conversations that we're having now, and the fact that organizations were forced to adopt that. And I think that certainly at the start of recruitment processes, I can't really see that being rolled back to having sort of first round face-to-face interviews where people have found that video is very effective at the start of the recruitment process. And what's been interesting is that there's a number of industries and companies who were laboring under this this perception that video interviewing would never work in their industry, would never work for the kind of people that they were talking to. And now they've had to do that, and it's actually shown its value. And I think that has taken us on a huge leap forward. And there are other technologies that come off the back of it that make it much more interesting. So it's been a fascinating time for adoption of technology in recruitment, and how that technology is now moving forward.
Amazing, thanks. And yeah, certainly the industry I used to be in never really took using Zoom calls and conference calls to use them. They used to have team meetings where you travel for miles, and they've certainly adopted it now. So a lot of change going on. So thank you very much. Okay, so let's have a little bit of audience participation nice and early. So I think one of my colleagues is going to launch the first poll for today, if we can have that up, and then if you can just take a few seconds just to fill in the few questions. So we've basically got a few choices for you. So the first question is around the talent war and what impact it's had. The second is around the great resignation and what impacts that's had, and then the speed necessitated to hire, and also about remote working. So fantastic, and we've got results coming in already. So we'll just give that a few seconds to see what we see. That's amazing on the talent war. Certainly 6 out of 10 already are saying it's had a serious impact. Wow. And some impact remote working. So again, very interesting for what you were saying earlier, Matt, and sort of the reason I asked that question leading into this. certainly some to serious impact is very heavy on the remote working. Anything else that jumps out for you there, Matt? And again, sorry, just looking at the Great Resignation as well, only 1 out of 18 said no impact.
Yeah, I mean, what jumps out for me, particularly with the difficulties in finding talent, is it's affecting everyone. So many different, talent markets. There's shortages of people, and I think it's really putting a very big focus on recruitment. It's also putting a very big focus on retention and internal mobility. And I think employers are thinking about talent and talent strategies sort of far deeper than they were 2 years ago.
Brilliant, fantastic, and thank you everyone for filling in the poll. That's really good, and we will have a second poll in a little while. So thank you so much. You should be able to see I think Kate shared the results. So thank you. So moving on then, and let's look at the key stages of the employee journey, which there are really 3. So we're looking at recruiting, onboarding and training, and then finally offboarding. So Matt, can you share some insights around those 3 areas for us as well?
Yeah, I think this is what's really interesting about this for me is traditionally we've always talked about these as very separate processes. Within an organization, they might be managed by different people and have different stakeholders. They may well use different types of technology that don't necessarily work together very well. But I think what's really clear is we have to look at this from an employee perspective. And from an employee perspective, this is a seamless process. I'm thinking about joining this company. I'm joining this company. I'm developing my career at this company. I'm leaving this company. It's a journey. It's not just a disjointed series of events. It's a kind of a flowing journey. And I think that the employers that embrace that and really think about that have got kind of a massive advantage. To dig into some of the things that are happening, obviously talked a bit about recruitment already. One of the things that I'm seeing happening a lot is people really working hard to streamline their recruitment processes internally. Really looking at, do we need all these stages? What value do we get from this assessment? Do we really need to interview someone 7 times, 8 times, 5 times, 4 times, whatever it is? And really aligning, hiring managers to that process as well, in terms of, everyone having an input, things working really well, people understanding the imperative in terms of speed and having to do things quicker than they did in the past. And we'll talk later about the part that technology plays in this, but actually that process bit is absolutely critical, because you can have the world's best recruiting technology, but if you're using it to manage a process that's broken or is meaningless or is really annoying the people going through it, then it's kind of pointless. Onboarding, really interesting. As everyone will know, onboarding in the last 2 years, where companies have had to onboard people remotely. There are people who may well have been in their role for nearly 2 years now and never been to the office and never met their colleagues face to face. So I think we've all had to adjust to this period of how do you make onboarding entirely digital, and how do you also go that extra mile and make that extra effort to make sure someone's got the information that they need, that they feel part of the culture, that they're contributing, that they have all that stuff. And I think hopefully what will come out of this is, whatever companies go back to, whether they all go back to the office or they're hybrid or they're fully remote, whatever it might be, this kind of relentless sort of 2-year focus on onboarding and trying to get it right and making it digital will mean that onboarding is much better and much more joined up in the future. So I think that's been that's kind of been a positive. And then the training part of it, businesses are changing. The things that we all do, digital transformation, it means that employers need an ever-evolving set of skills, and they need those very quickly. We've seen from the poll how difficult it is for people to find, to sometimes find the skills to bring into their business. And we've also seen, in terms of the Great Resignation, or whatever we want to call it, the importance of trying to retain people as well, and upskilling people internally, really focusing on redeploying people and internal mobility has never been more important. And again, technology can really support that in terms of some of the great digital learning systems that are out there, and there is an increasing move to things like internal talent marketplaces, and using technology to sort of help redeploy people around organizations. And then finally, offboarding. I mean, I think this is the area that doesn't get much attention at all. I think it's critical. It's all part of the experience. I think you have to give someone a great experience when they're leaving the business, because they can be advocates for that company. But also, I think looking at and investing in alumni relations is potentially a critical part of dealing with the talent problems that we've got. So some of that is about enticing people back to the organization who's left. Some of that is getting referrals from people for, an advocacy in terms of bringing people to the organization. But also, as we move to perhaps more hybrid workforces where people are coming into organizations much more on a project basis and bringing, skills in for very, very specific tasks, managing alumni and managing people who've worked for you before becomes a much more critical part of that. So I think it's an area that doesn't get much focus, but there's some huge opportunities in that.
Brilliant, Matt. Thank you. I had two questions. One of them was a massive question around alumni, but you've just answered most of it, so I'm not going to ask that. I'm going to ask a slightly different one that's shorter, okay, but still interesting, and it's actually pertinent for us right now as a business. Is onboarding. Do you have a view on how long onboarding should be? It's all right talking about the crucial first weeks and months, but how long should onboarding really take? Is there a perfect timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very difficult it's very difficult to say, and it's perhaps very difficult to generalize. What I would say is it kind of needs to be seamless. I think, onboarding needs to flow into, development within the organization. And, you need great internal communications. You need, really good, really good kind of planning and talent management and all those things. So I can't really give you an answer in terms of how long it should take, but I just think it should be this seamless process that people perhaps don't even notice that it's finished, and they're now in a kind of another part of the employee journey.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So Matt, what are your thoughts with regards to technology supporting the employee journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, as I said when I was talking through it, I think a lot of the things and a lot of the developments that we're seeing are things that are essentially being powered by being powered by technology. I think one of the most interesting aspects of all of this for me is the speed of adoption, but again, I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. I think the big trends that I've seen in technology in the last sort of 12 months or so have been the acceleration of automation and the improvement of AI in terms of being effective in things like recruitment. So automation, I've seen there are organizations who are using automation to do things like schedule interviews, give feedback, do all these things. And that is a way of making the recruitment process a lot quicker, but also raising the quality of that process, because the candidates going through are getting better communication about what's happening, and things are happening quicker. So I think automation has been a big one. AI is an interesting area. It's being used in all kinds of different aspects of recruiting, from finding people to matching people to managing communication and all those kind of things. So difficult in this sort of short period of time to go into it fully. What I will say is, there has been a flip side to that in terms of questions about bias and what's going on, who's designing these AI systems and what do they do. We've seen legislation in America. So in New York State, they're bringing in some new legislation around the use of automated and AI-driven recruitment tools. And I think that the best tech providers in this space are very transparent about what they're offering people and how it works. And I think that, they're the kind of questions that people need to ask of their technology provider in terms of, how is this put together? How does it work? Can we get some transparency in terms of what's going on? So that's the flip side of the AI thing. There's a real sort of tendency for all of us to look at the shiny objects coming down the track. So, I'm amazed that we're not doing this webinar in the metaverse. Or wearing headsets and being ridiculous avatars and all this kind of stuff. And there's obviously also a lot of a hype around uses of blockchain in technology and different things that are going on with cryptocurrency and all that kind of stuff. And I think it can be very, very tempting in talent acquisition and HR to get to almost get kind of distracted by technologies that are being massively hyped and, aren't really quite with us yet. And one of the things that I do on my podcast is I explore those technologies in a practical way from, is anyone using this? What's going on? And so I think it's good to have the newer technologies on your radar, but actually focus needs to be on the fundamentals in terms of using the technology that you've got, improving the process and all those kind of things. And I think that comes back to the most important point of all, which I'm sure everyone listening is kind of thinking, which is time. Technology takes time. The procurement of technology, the implementation of technology, it's expensive, not just in terms of the cost, the cost of it, but also the resources that are involved. So I think from a talent acquisition perspective, people are really looking for simplification, but also looking for things that they can build and deploy quickly, shape to their needs, and really use things like no-code technology to deploy technology at the speed of the challenges that they have, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks, Matt. And just you were talking about practicality there. It got me thinking, have you got an example of the most impressive use of tech, or the most adventurous or left field? Have you seen any sort of like funky things over the past 12 to 24 months, maybe, that firms are using to recruit?
Yeah, I mean, there's always someone who's doing something, something crazy. Really interestingly, during the pandemic, there's been much less of that. I think people have been less inclined to experiment. A lot of it has been driven by necessity. So I've seen people using automation and AI to solve recruiting challenges and things like that. So much less of that kind of cutting edge innovation. But I think that over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, we will start to see that. I think we'll see companies experimenting much more with, the metaverses and everything that's out there. But to be honest with you, in the last couple of years, it's been very practical. And how does this technology solve the challenge that I'm looking at right now? And it'll be interesting to see, people's kind of, landscapes getting a bit longer in terms of experimentation as we move forward.
Thanks. Yeah, we're not quite ready for the virtual office and virtual handshake in the world of VR just yet. But now it's time for our second poll. So I think we'll see that on the screen. Just there we go. So this is really concentrating on the tech that you're currently using to support the employee journey. So you can see there's 4 questions there: virtual reality, AI, mobile apps, and then in the future, would you look to incorporate future technology? So we'll just give it a second for some of the responses to drop through. It'd be interesting to see if what the answers are here. If people are using VR, one person is already. AI, yes, heavy, got 67%, 75% now of respondents in AI. What about mobile apps? 60% of respondents. It's just gone up. And in the future, okay, so there's a big appetite there to incorporate future technologies. So that's a heavy landslide to get the best talent necessary. So that's completely understandable. Just give that a second to sort of let everyone have a chance to respond. Anything that jumps out to you there, Matt, at all in the initial responses?
Yeah, I've done virtual reality a disservice because there are people out there using it, and I have seen people use it for things like training and communication and stuff like that. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that people are using using AI and things like that.
It's be interesting to learn more about how they're utilizing it. We've got five people now saying that they're using VR, so that's one to know more about.
Am I allowed to be included, Kyle? Although I don't use it for work, no, I'm not allowed to be included.
Yeah, for flights, possibly. So I think that's enough time for most people to have responded. So yeah, some interesting responses there. Yeah, the VR one's definitely interesting. So I'm just going to close that down on the screen. So I think, for me, Matt, just looking at how we, as a business, have kind of seen the use of apps, I suppose, in particularly in the recruitment part of clients' challenge, if you like. There's one particular app that I talk about here, and the app was built to support graduates or trainees and draw them toward the company. So using that technology to attract the target demographic and highlighting the benefits of joining the firm, etc. And it really addressed the challenge that they were facing of attracting top talent and competing with their rivals in the market. So the app included some features, where the candidate can learn about the training experience and the tasks of a trainee, what would be expected of them in the first month, etc. That onboarding piece. It had an overview and background of the business. You could learn more about areas of the business and the way that they undertake the work they do. There was, I think this was a really good feature. There was an introductory video and some articles from the training department. To really give the potential candidates, I suppose, an overview of what they can expect. It included details of awards that the business had won. There were FAQs, and you could learn from others that have been through the same journey you might be about to take. And I think it'd be a good idea to include interviews with recent joiners as well, so you can get sort of real, first-hand experience from those recent joiners. The app also included an intro to the recruitment team, so had job vacancies, overview of the application process, really trying to inform the candidates of what to expect through that process. Hopefully, it isn't going to be the sort of 6-7 interviews that you alluded to earlier on. It'd be a shorter process, and then the last two things really were next steps, including sort of webinars and useful articles for the candidate to look at, whether that be related to the job in the firm or just the wider industry. And then there was a feedback survey, so the business could gather intelligence really and drive improvements to the app itself, the recruitment process, get feedback from people about why they might not apply, etc. But yeah, that was a really interesting app that one client built.
And what kind of, how did that go down? What kind of response has that had from the users and the company that kind of built it?
Yeah, so the initial feedback, from the original use case was really good. It was really positive. So, it was about differentiating themselves from the competitors in their industry, that didn't have this free to view, app really for candidates to look at. And then what they found was, they were getting a lot of word of mouth promotion. You're also looking at a job in this industry. Have you looked at this firm? Have you seen their app? And they were getting a lot of word of mouth referrals from candidates in that way. So I think that was one of the biggest sort of early wins that they got from the app itself.
Superb. Thank you both for that. Really appreciate it. So what about the adoption though, and how people have really embraced technology in the workplace, specifically for recruitment and retention? So Matt, back to you really. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is obviously something that I've mentioned all the way through, because I think it is the biggest news of what's happened in the last 2 years. I've been working in a sector for quite some time, and one of the things that's always characterized talent acquisition is tech adoption has never been particularly fast. So, people will develop new ways of, new tools and technologies for recruiting, but it can take quite some considerable time for those to become on stream and be adopted by people. And that's gone all the way back to, when the internet became a business tool, and then when the world went mobile and all these kind of things. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. But traditionally, talent acquisition, and particularly HR, have been the slower adopters in the organization, and we've seen marketing and finance and sales perhaps move quicker with new business technologies that have happened. Last 2 years, that's dramatically changed. People have had to adopt new technologies very, very quickly to deal with the recruiting challenges they've had, and those challenges have changed. So, if you think back to 2020, I don't know, 2020, 2021 seems to be just one long year in my head, but they were apparently separate years. 2020 in the retail sector, there were huge volumes of people applying for jobs. People have been furloughed from other sectors. People who wanted to help out the kind of frontline, retail and food supermarkets that were keeping us all fed and keeping us all going. So those organizations had to adopt things like AI screening and chatbots for communication, just to get through the sheer amount of applications that they had. And there's some really fascinating examples of that happening and dramatically improving the recruitment process and getting better outcomes for them. But they had to do it. They were just faced with this deluge of applications that they had to get through to keep people to keep the country moving. And as times evolve, the challenges have now evolved, and now it's very difficult to hire people. And we're seeing people embracing things like automated sourcing technologies, and again, different ways of communicating, and also different ways of doing talent management and reviews, and knowing the skills that you have in your organization. So we've seen a huge acceleration in adoption, and we've seen, and I said this already when I was right at the beginning when we were talking about video interviewing, we've seen people's mindsets shift towards technology. Talking to each other like this is now the norm. So adoption's increased, mindsets have shifted. The amount of investment in technology from VCs and other kind of investment sources has just been off the scale, which means the speed of development and innovation in recruiting and HR tech has never been quicker. But where I think we are now, I think we're at a very interesting point, because people have been using technology because they've kind of been forced to do it. And I now think we're at this stage where it's much more about how do you set your strategy for the next 2 to 3 years. And it may well be, as part of that, some of the technologies that you've been using during the pandemic because you were forced to do it, or it was easy to do, or they just happened to be technologies that we already used, may well not be fit for purpose anymore. And there may be better ways and different ways of doing things that will fit much better into the strategy that people have. So I think that we're at this very interesting time where people are reviewing the tech stack that they have, looking at their strategies, looking what's available in the market, looking at the trends, and really working out how to move forward from here. Because I think we are now, very much at that next stage.
Superb, thanks, Matt. And yeah, it's really interesting that the world's changing in so many ways, and it took a major pandemic to force key change, and certainly with the use of technology and stuff, not just in recruiting, but in many types and many areas of businesses. So yeah, thank you very much. So if we get a little bit more specific now then, and look at how apps might help shape the future of talent acquisition and retention, I'm going to go back to you, Carl, because I think you've got a couple of examples to talk us through, a couple of really good examples of this.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We've seen a significant increase in our clients building acquisition and onboarding apps. So adding features that address the staff throughout their employment to ensure they remain engaged and involved with the business. And we're always really looking at how we maintain or make sure really that employers are aware of the value in working for the business and the reasons they shouldn't be looking elsewhere, those sorts of things. With regards to attracting the right candidates, I mentioned an app earlier. I think a lot of features there that I would include, but some other examples of key features to include in, or have been included in recruiting apps that we've built with clients, is company culture. So what does it mean to work at the business? What's expected of you? Health and well-being, obviously a huge topic and really important, making candidates aware of, associated benefits in that space. Sharing stories of the sort of latest standout performers, so you can see how people are achieving and succeeding at the business, and really promotions, etc., those sorts of tales. Latest news from the business, so what's going on, they're transparent, they're moving into new spaces, all those sorts of topics that I think candidates are really interested in, and can maybe be the differentiator between them applying or joining you and another firm. An overview of the technology that you're provided with, the software you'll use, your areas of interest, those sorts of things. A really useful part, and I think there was some hesitation around putting this in originally, but it's an overview of the group and the organizational chart. Now obviously you don't put in contact details necessarily and those sorts of things, but it's good for candidates to be able to see how the business is organized and where they fit in. Useful materials for the career path. Again, you might not end up employing this person, but I think you're supporting them and you're helping the industry as a whole, which is a really positive thing. And then, as I said earlier, just sort of job vacancies and the application process. But I think the really clever thing and the interesting thing that we see our clients doing is using these apps to then transition once the candidate joins the business. So behind a login, for example, you put in some newly accessible features. So they include, we've seen clients adding in, what to expect on your first day, your first week, your first month, including personalized agendas. Talked about tech in sort of candidate part, but a tech survey, what equipment do you need? You're working from home, you're remote working all the time, do you need a desk, a lamp, whatever it might be. Training courses that are available to you, and a personalized calendar for that if you're opted into them as you join. Key contacts around the business, and I think this is a really good feature. So it could be somebody in the IT team to help you get access, for example. It could be your HR contact, your buddy, your manager, your mentor. So the app can host in-app chat, and you can have an email links and telephone numbers if you want to contact them directly out of the app as well. And further on, once you go into the sort of continual working part of an employee's journey, you want to support your staff with things like benefits, how to access them, ensuring staff can take advantage of the benefits, those things that are above and beyond their salary and their bonus, etc. It might be dental plans, gym partnerships, morning yoga classes. You want to include things like social event calendars, particularly if you're trying to bring that remote workforce together. So it might be a Wednesday evening social game of Monopoly or something, or drinks. Training, make sure that all of your staff are aware of the training courses available. So having that calendar and that agenda in the app where your staff can easily find all of the resources available to them and budgets that they've got to spend on other courses, all those sorts of things, including submission applications, I think is a really important part to support your staff through that journey. And we've seen good success with that with our clients. And then a few other, sort of smaller ongoing things, so surveys, polls, feedback facilities, mentors. I mentioned earlier on, like a list of people available that you can sort of apply to have as your mentor. And then, we haven't seen this as much, and I think this talks to something that Matt mentioned earlier on, and that's the offboarding piece. Now, we do have a client with an offboarding survey, that sort of questions the outgoing member of staff, but We've seen one client take this a step further, and they have an alumni section, which is, I think, really impressive. And it includes, links to vacancies, a referral form. And I think it's really good method to try and keep your outgoing employees engaged, and hopefully if they're good, and one day they might come back to you. So I think there's three sections really that we see in the main. It's that recruitment piece, the cultural piece around the business, the onboarding section, which will last however long, a week, a month, 3 months, and then you've got that ongoing support piece.
Brilliant. Thanks, Carl.
I have a question. So I talked a second ago about talent acquisition and HR being it's slower on the adoption curve than other parts of the organization. And I know that you work in other sectors that might be adopting technology quicker. What have you learned? What can talent acquisition learn from what's happening in other sectors of the organization?
I think that's a really interesting question, Matt, because we typically, sometimes we'll start working with a client and we're working with one department, so it might be marketing or events or something, and then we end, as we talk about other use cases and share what other clients are doing, and what's really possible with Fliplet, we then start to work with other departments. And you're right in the sense that HR might be slower adopters, but we have over the past a lot of the features I was talking about there are in apps that have been built in the last 6 months, really, with clients that are relatively new to Fliplet. So I think they are slower adopters, but we have seen a shift over the past 6 months of HR learning, development, and recruitment teams, if they're siloed and separate, or sort of one department, being more involved from the beginning of the journey with us, which is quite an interesting shift.
Cool. And Chris, have you got any thoughts on that?
So I think for me, talking about other sectors, and people that have adopted it really quick. So we work with a number of different sectors, but one I'd probably single out is we work with a number of large legal clients. And Matt, I think you said a few times that ways of working are changing constantly, especially with the climate we've been in over the last couple of years. This has meant that various teams across organisations have had to look at how they communicate and work with each other, as well as prospective candidates for open roles. So what we've seen is a massive shift in the last couple of years to moving more and more communications and workflow processes to using mobile technology. I like a bit of research. I do like a few stats. So looking at some research and stats that's been undertaken in the last year, some of the stats for mobile usage were quite incredible. So average person apparently picks up their phone 58 times a day. I think my wife would disagree. I think I pick mine up probably 4 times that much. 70% of the sessions are less than 2 minutes, so very quick interactions, whereas 5% are more than 10 minutes. And it adds up to about 3 hours, just over 3 hours per day per person. I still think I probably use my phone more than that. But we've certainly seen this with the firms that we deal with. And again, definitely in the legal sector. So one example I just want to share with you for a couple of minutes is a large law firm at the start of the coronavirus outbreak. Their senior partner basically came up with an idea very quick. He had an important part of lockdown is staying connected. So his words, we wanted to help by providing a forum for those conversations. And it was about creating a sense of community and camaraderie and a different avenue for it. And basically the problem they had was that they were all going to be working remotely, some of them, and then part of the company working remotely and some in the office. And nobody knew how long that was going to last for. So they had to adjust to that challenge and maintain a good work-life balance. There was going to be adverse effects on people's mental and physical health, and also loosen the social bonds between teams. So other issue they had, staff only had WhatsApp and email groups for staying in touch. And outside of email or one-to-one calls, there's no place for employees to talk informally and share ideas. So they came up very quickly, and this is the other thing about quick adoption, they came up very quickly with an app called Open House, which basically helps their employees maintain the social fabric of its teams and combat other effects during lockdown. So the features it had, similar to some things that Carl talked about earlier, multiple chat room areas created, including wellbeing, remote working, helping others, clubs, hobbies. There was pictures of kids, of pets, etc. It's all downloaded securely on mobile devices, so they could access it at any time. And it's definitely a mixture of firm-produced content, so how to help with mindfulness practices, some routines to go through, but also peer-created content. So the pet photos, the just for fun section, the joke section. Employees can create and comment and bookmark content. It's available globally. They've used it with international colleagues, as well as colleagues in the UK where it was produced. Pre-recorded seminars were on there, and recognition, so public recognition for people within the company. And bear in mind, this app was produced in a 3-week period, from the managing partner having the conception of the idea to putting it into practice and delivering it to a multi-thousand person law firm. Was just over 3 weeks, which was incredible. And the feedback they've had has been absolutely amazing. So it's a great example of how you can move quick if you embrace the technology and produce a really effective solution to maintain really good employee communication.
Chris, out of interest, is the client looking to adapt and sort of innovate further on that app?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, as I said, it was launched at the start of lockdown. It's been innovated on since. And funnily enough, in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 months, probably from October, November last year, and I suppose it's timely with the webinar today, talking about how they can get pre-joiners getting involved in that before they actually join the firm, and looking at more internal processes, maybe having a portal in it to keep people aware of what the state of the IT systems are. So it's becoming more of a bit of more of an internal comms platform, but very much keeping the basis that it's for the people. It's not for the management. It's to help people communicate better. But yeah, constantly innovating on it, and I think that's key with any application and any innovation that you have, is you don't just launch something and leave it and expect people to keep using it. To get people to come back, you've got to keep innovating on it and keep adding different things. So yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Chris. And then Matt, I think it'd be good, sort of last thoughts from you. Where do you see the future?
So, I could talk about this for hours, but we've only got a few minutes left. So, I'll just sort of make 3 points, because I think, I've said a lot about, technologies and what's happening and what people are working on. I was trying to think of a sort of a phrase to sum this up, and I've come up with sort of more radical evolution, because I think what we've been through in the last 2 years has been radical evolution in terms of how talent acquisition works. And I think this works in both ways. I think we'll see more of that, but also I think we'll see evolution that's more radical, because technology is developing at a blistering pace, and I think the things will be possible in a couple of years that we're not even thinking about now. So I think that's one point. The second point is, it's very easy to talk about technology and companies at the cutting edge and all these great things are happening, but fundamentally there is still so much work to do on things like candidate experience and onboarding and the recruitment process. And for many organizations, they're still very much at the start of the journey in terms of, dealing with having the right process, putting the right technology in place to deal with the challenges that we're seeing in terms of, great resignation, problems finding talent. And they're two issues that aren't going away anytime soon. They were sort of accelerated by the pandemic, but they're based on very sort of long-term underlying factors. And then the third point, which I'm really interested in, is personalization. So I think that we will see a move towards a much more personalized candidate experience, a much more personalized employee experience, and technology and things like apps. I see it absolutely central to driving that.
And what do you think we can expect sort of in the near future? So this year, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can see this, the start of the things that I was talking about, but really, I think over the next few months, what I'm hearing from the industry is this focus on speed and quality. So how do we speed up recruitment? How do we improve the quality of the process, the quality of the candidate experience, but also the quality of the people that we're hiring? And I talked a lot about process. I haven't talked much about measurement and data, but they're things that people are, looking at very closely. But I think that's going to be, for many organizations, the overriding priority over the next few months.
Amazing. Thanks, Matt. So I'm just going to share my screen again. You might be pleased to hear that's the end of the discussion. I really enjoyed that. I think it's some really insightful things there. So we're going to move on to the Q&A that you've been sending to my colleague during the session. While we do that, we have put a QR code on the screen. If you do want to get your phone out and point your camera at that, you will have a survey to fill in, just a brief survey on what you've seen today and your thoughts. We'd really appreciate as much feedback as you can. It certainly helps us and helps us with what webinars we're going to do in the future. So let me just take a look at the questions that have come in. And Matt, it looks like there's quite a few for you, which is quite good. So the first one I'm going to put to you is, what's the single most important thing to consider when recruiting using tech?
Wow, that's a big question. Single most important thing to consider. I think the single most important thing to consider is that technology is not a silver bullet. It's not the answer. You can't take a bad process and add technology and expect technology to fix it. So I think the single biggest point is technology is an enabler, and so many things need to happen around the edge and the side of that for it to use properly. So it's great to talk about technology all the time, but we have to put it in that context that it won't fix a bad process, and it won't find talent for your organization if you've got a kind of brand that no one wants to work for. So it's just part of that picture.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So just not to pick on you totally, let's go to Kyle. So Kyle, how much work is involved in updating and maintaining these types of apps?
I think the short answer is not a lot. They're very easy to update and maintain. So once the app's built and you've got the structure there, if you want to update or change content, very easy to do, to upload that. If you've got some new data you want to add in, it's putting in data source really quick and easy. Obviously, we've got a training sort of program and also the CS team that can support you to do that. It's really quick and easy.
Brilliant, great answer. And then another one, this one definitely is for you, Matt. So who would be recommended to handle offboarding? I'd imagine they're asking that from within the organisation.
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I suppose it's one of those things that's going to depend from from organisation to organisation. I mean, traditionally, it's been something that HR have always managed, but for me, it's kind of like, how do you make sure that's part of the process? So how do you make sure that the information that you're getting at the offboarding stage is being reflected back to the business, but also how the opportunities for talent acquisition in terms of referrals and advocacy are also kind of plugged in. So I think traditionally it's been something that HR have managed, but I think as we add technology into this, it should be something that those other areas of the organization are involved in. Again, it's difficult to give a definitive answer because every company will be different.
Amazing, thank you. So we've only got about a minute left, so I'm going to let you do a 30-second plug. So I know you've got a book coming out in March, which is Digital Talent: Find, Recruit and Retain the People Your Business Needs in a World of Digital Transformation. That's a big title, Matt.
That is a big title, yeah.
30 seconds, and just tell everybody about it because it sounds brilliant.
Yeah, so it encompasses a lot of the things that we've been talking about on the webinar. I wrote it with my very talented co-author, Mervyn Dinnan. We started writing it before the pandemic. The pandemic happened, we had to rewrite the whole thing, basically. But it looks at digital transformation and how that affects the whole of an organization. So as an organization, how do you make sure you have the right skills in your business to deal with the way that business is moving forward? And we look at all of these aspects. So we look at talent acquisition and employer branding, internal mobility, learning and development. There's a big piece in there in technology, and there's lots of stuff about what the future of work might look like.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing it in March. So about a minute left, 30 seconds. So just to give you an update on what we've got coming out of our upcoming webinars. So Is Mobile the Future of Legal Tech is on Tuesday, the 1st of March. And our 2022 features roadmap, which is what's new and exclusive with Fliplet, will be out shortly after that. So you can have a look at those on fliplet.com/webinars. So that's it for today. Thank you so much to my colleague Kyle, and definitely to Matt. I think that was absolutely fantastic, Matt. Really insightful, some really good stuff that everybody can take away there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.